So yeah, welcome. I guess something has changed. So Lauren has joined the Science Kaylee team and be working with us through this network, and as well another piece of work with the Ideas Fund, which I'll mention briefly at the very end as well. So welcome, Lauren, officially.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all again.
I've got a couple of slides to talk through, and then I kind of want to get through the kind of key bits, just to expand on a little bit more of the detail of what I put in the email, hopefully tantalizing. And then there's going to be plenty of time for us to have a bit of a reflection, and then, yeah, it'd be really good just to have a bit of a chat to see what people are interested in, if you've got any queries, and of course, if you've got any particular ideas, and we can go from there. And hopefully we get a bit of a catch up about how everything is going towards the end. But we want to make it short and snappy. So for today, of course, all the usual things around setting the space, making sure it's respectful, accessible. If there's any tech issues, as usual, just give me a wee shout. If you've got any questions, raise your hand and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to highlight that this isn't going to be a public, but as I said, we will probably send a copy of this presentation. So hello for those of you listening in the future, to those who couldn't join us, just for the key information. And the Padlet, of course, is also, as you all know, be shared with other members of the network and partners as well. Just to welcome, we've just had Neil and Katrina join us. Welcome. So today is actually a great day because we've just launched a new Shiny website on the BSA website, which has, like I put in the email, it's got the new video. So thank you so much for everyone who got involved in that, particularly Shona, Florian, who got interviewed through that. Do have a watch of it. Christina's put a wee blog together, which kind of contextualizes the evaluation. And we've kind of teased a little bit about what's going to happen next with the network as well. So hopefully that's useful. And just another call out. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, there's a resources section. So if there's anything you want to add to that resource section, just let us know. And it doesn't have to be immediately, but it's just so we can just update that website as we go along as well. So I guess when we had the opportunity to chat to UK Research and Innovation, Jen joined our last conversation. Sadly, she couldn't join us today, but I think it's fair to say that they took a lot and learned a lot from this program. And so thank you so much for being so involved and being part of the evaluation and giving so much of your time. And so when we're thinking about, well, what could be next, we just wanted to reflect back on some of the things that we've asked you many times, we know. So wanted to kind of reflect back on what's informed this next phase. So Lauren, are you happy to talk through some of these slides?
Yeah, grand. So these were taken from either some of the Padlet questions or also from one of the Mentimeter ones. So specifically around questions about what you would like to see happen next within your community, there were suggestions of widening engagement through a legacy of resources that could be circulated throughout the community, and making sure that the community wholeheartedly supported their own climate action plans, sharing their processes and learning sharing that learning with other island communities as well. I think the next one was looking at what you'd want to see more specifically within your community research partnership. So there were some people talking about continuing to develop their project, or indeed working on parallel projects within the same partnership. And then longer term support to get continued funding, obviously an awareness that it can be quite tough to know what opportunities there are as a community. And then kind of thinking about specific learning from the projects. One point was about transferring the learning into policy for real change, and using that as a kind of template or structure that other communities could use across the country. And also specifically being able to leverage applications to UKRI community network funding. So kind of thinking that in a kind of more longer term sense. And then, a few other kind of reflections that kind of came out from across the projects, and an awareness that communities are diverse. And so the loudest voices aren't always representative, which I think is a really important point. Looking for more collaboration opportunities with people in this kind of cohort, I presume it means that in the network, And pursuing further research in this field. So I think this perhaps came from the kind of researcher side, working directly with communities more to develop impactful research. And then really nicely put at the end there, awareness, education, and support. I think that kind of captures quite a few of those sentiments. So then again, more specifically thinking about some of the things that people might have wanted to see happen with the network. So perhaps keeping the community of practice going, so they could continue those conversations. Perhaps for groups in the network to be able to choose how much time to be able to contribute on a flexible basis, obviously an awareness that people have different kind of availability and capacity, and finding a way to continue links in some way. And again, noting that there is that kind of capacity issue there. Then also a brilliant suggestion to do a tour of the Highlands and visit everyone and welcome groups to the project. I would absolutely love to join that tour. Maybe couldn't quite stretch to a full tour, but definitely something I want to take from that. And then a really specific one saying that, someone would find useful having a coach or an ally because there is just so much to do. Certainly something I'm sure many people working in community organizations can appreciate. And then on that note, kind of cross-community organization collaborations within the wider network. So I think, yeah, these were all things that, as Lewis says, kind of were fed back throughout the program last year and have very much shaped how we're trying to think about how we take this network and these kind of new grants on further. But yeah, I'll pass back to you, Liz.
Thanks very much, Lauren. So hopefully that's not surprising. I mean, they're your words, and of course there's a lot more from that, but I think that's informed the kind of three main strands that all link into each other, and that's really important to kind of say. But just to reiterate what I put into the email, so the first one is around developing what could be a more sustainable network with further opportunities to integrate with wider stakeholders. So we've had really positive conversations with the Highlands and Islands Climate Hub, for example, which has developed, and I know Joan was sad not to be able to join the community practice in the back in November. So thinking about further integration with climate change stakeholders, but also community researcher stakeholders as well. So people interested in that interface and the collaborations between that. Building capacity. So the second aim is working, obviously building off the learning that you have done in the first round, first phase, as it were, and actually being able to provide a small grant to enable to think about all as a transition support to a what next, whether that's consolidating the learning, building on that, and thinking about next steps as well, and giving you the opportunity and support you need and completely tailored to do that. And then the third one is recognizing that even within this group, there's lots of different types of organizations and groups and communities you're working with, and ways of working and issues around climate change. But even then, there are gaps within this network in particular. And so we wanted to make sure there was an opportunity for new groups who are still underrepresented within research and innovation, within climate change, to be able to have the same opportunity that you did and probably changing that process quite a lot. So being a little bit more, even more hands-on, I think, and supportive through the matching with the researchers process, for example, to identify particular groups that might be interested, who might be a bit newer to climate change as well. That was another element that felt important to balance as well. And then match them with the researcher, and then be able to connect them with yourselves and the wider network. So they all feed into each other, but recognizing that there are gaps. And so just to kind of talk about what that means in practice, and maybe give you a bit of an idea of times and dates. So the first 2 points I'll focus on to begin with. So one's most pertinent to you for now. So of course we're chatting with yourselves, and what we'll do after this is probably set up a conversation with each partnership to start thinking about what you might want to use your £2,000 capacity building grants for. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second, about what some ideas, and of course that's what we're here to talk about today. So everyone's going to be different, everyone's going to need different things, the partnerships are going to have evolved in different ways, so just really want to reflect that. So we're going to have separate conversations with all of you over the next couple of weeks, if that's okay. And there will be some paperwork, but hopefully in that conversation, we can talk you through the action plan, the kind of key things. And that, again, I'll talk through this in a little bit more, but, just giving us a provisional idea of what the budget might be spent on and why you think what you'd like to do, basically, just to put that onto paper towards the end of April. We're hoping to be able to kick off a first online community of practice towards the end of May, maybe very beginning of June. Again, so one big change just to highlight is that each community of practice will be both internal but also external. So a little bit more like the final one, probably at least half of it will be focused in on this particular group, and then later on with the new group as well. But the other half of it is also going to be a bit more open to stakeholders to talk about and think about policy, for example, or different areas. And again, really open. And we've got our networks and connections, but you may have other suggestions who should be invited to these community practices. So again, hopefully keeping that kind of, making it even more open and thinking about the kind of longer term. The next community practice after the one in May, well, actually, just before I should, what we imagine is that whatever support you want to do, what you want to do, it will start, well, to be honest, whenever it gets signed off, kind of come mid-May, for example, certainly by the first community practice. But we anticipate that's completely up to you. Some of you may want to do more at the beginning, for example. Some of you actually might not have capacity until later in the year, for example, and that's totally grand. So completely tailored, and remember, it's a £2,000 grant, so it's not being realistic with what that can do. The next community practice in September hopefully will be in person. So this hopefully means by this process we'll have our new partnerships, and so that's hopefully 6 different organizations who will be matched with the researcher, and hopefully they can meet everyone in person in September, maybe in Uist. Recommendations very welcome. And again, that's based on feedback. Actually, I think a lot of people valued the in-person meeting. We appreciate it take a lot of time. There is budget to cover people's time, the additional time for the in-person for this round as well. But putting that early in the process, I think that was partly because of the way the restrictions were with COVID and lockdown last time. But actually, hopefully we can do that to begin with. And that's about a year since at that point, since we met last in person. So hopefully that's a good time point. And then we've got 2 more community practices, December and in March. And that's hopefully, coming towards the midpoint. We'll be thinking about what next for this network. Is this going to be embedded within the other networks that exist across the Hines and Islands? Does it continue in its own right? I think there's going to be wide questions, and again, open to all sorts of different ideas of what that could look like. And then just to bring in what will happen with the new partnership grants and the process. So certainly going to be doing some internal research, and there will be a call out for new groups as well to get involved. But being really targeted, I think, in terms of which groups that we think are not represented in this current cohort. And that feels really important, and providing that support. Hopefully that matching process will start come May, again, probably a bit more less rushed, much more supported. And we're hoping that actually, even if they're not matched, the new groups, the 6, might be able to join our first online, at least a part of the first community of practice, just to kind of hear from you about what projects have happened and what you've learned. The matching will finish in hopefully around June, and they'll kind of have their project plan finalized, and probably assuming that people aren't going to get going in July with summer holidays, which would be fair enough, the project delivery will start come September, so just in time for that community. All right, so I guess just very practical. Are there any questions about the timeline? I'll talk a bit more about the grants in particular, but just want to give an opportunity for that, or maybe from Lauren or Christina if there's anything I've missed. Nope. Okay.
All right, sounds good. I don't know if you can see me. Yeah, no, sounds good. I'm shaking my head.
Nice. All right. So the capacity building grants. So a bit more detail about that. So I think what's really important. So the main question we're really trying to respond to, and hopefully this has seen a bit of a rare opportunity, is to fund you, and it's really important. It's not about more delivery. So we're interested in the question: what would nurture what was started in the first phase? What would support you to a next step? for your partnership, for the work that you've been doing. And so a couple of examples we thought of, but again, open to more. So of course it could potentially, this £2,000 could fund more visits between the community researcher partners. Hopefully that would coincide with more research and development time or reflection time. Some of you are still writing reports or maybe want to be continuing, and so hopefully give you a bit of time for that. Of course, if you're hoping to get more funding, it might give you a bit of time and support to do that. What's important this time is that, again, there are some things that we'd be able to support in-house in the sense of, we have Lauren joining us. And so, for example, if you are writing grants, that we could be really specific in terms of actually, if you want us to help read the grant applications with you, give you advice, and actually that's something I know that the Climate Hub are really excited by and would be able to provide as well in partnership. So there's lots more kind of, obviously, and that time, our time obviously wouldn't need to be costed, but it's just something for you to build in potentially as well. Of course, you might want to visit other community groups. It probably won't stretch to a whole tour of the Highlands Islands, I'm afraid, but you could, and it could be within the network, it could be out with, whatever feels appropriate. Of course, we approach the community of practices, obviously take time. The in-person one will have some additional time built in, but we appreciate that your time, some of this capacity grant might be used towards your time to support the network meeting. And I think that's, completely, yeah, that would be valid. The other idea, of course, and I'll come back to it, is that we, towards the end of the last network meeting, we had these working groups, and I think there's lots of activities that came out of that. And so you may want to set up your own kind of network working groups with the different members of the network or otherwise, just to kind of work through some of those kind of things and themes that came out. And then the last thing is it could be for specific training. So again, if there's things that would help you get to the next stage or help the community you're working with, mentorship type programs, allies was mentioned, for example, that is absolutely something we could facilitate. And again, for things like training, that an element of that could be pooled. So for example, if lots of you want to get training on X, Y, or Z, that could be something we commission as a group, and then that wouldn't necessarily come out from your individual £2,000, as it were, but is just shared among the network. Probably the important things, yeah, I'll keep stressing it, it isn't necessarily around project delivery. We want you to be realistic, and many of you put way more time in that first program, in the first project, and we really appreciate that. So we really want to steer you away from thinking about, okay, we're just going to repeat it again. That said, we appreciate there is an element where expanding could have some delivery elements. You might have conversations and that type of element, and I totally appreciate that, and we can probably talk that through as a group. But just to be really clear, we're not asking you to do another project. Please do not. This is about building and a transition. If you want to do something and scale, hopefully this is the funding to enable you to get that next funding application in to scale it, rather than thinking about this being the scaling money, just to be clear. And what else? We're totally open for different ideas. I just wanted to put this up. So just talking about the working groups, just as a bit of a reminder of what was discussed at the network meeting. And some of these are kind of more systems wide. Some of these are kind of more general problems. Some of them are very specific. So transition between hyperlocal to local, or challenging net zero, for example. And so again, maybe some inspiration for if you want to continue these conversations with particular members of the network, maybe that's something that could be done. And some of the time could be put towards that. All right, I'm just going to do one more slide, and then I think I'll take any questions, and we'll do a bit of reflection, then chat, and then we'll come back to the final bit. But just to talk about the process, just to round this off. So we'll organize individual meetings with you, as we've said, over the next couple of weeks, assuming that, of course, this is something you want to take up. And I have made that assumption, but let us know if that is not true. There will be a little bit of paperwork, but it's brief. So we just need a rough budget as what you'll do, how you'll be collaborative within your research community partnership, what you might anticipate the impacts might be. Again, this will evolve. We appreciate that, but just obviously to get some details so it could be signed off. The first payment would be expected around mid-May, assuming that all stays in plan. Duration of the plan is up to you. So again, being realistic with that. And there are, of course, community practice network meetings up until next March as planned. And there will be check-in meetings with ourselves. And hopefully this will tie into whatever your plans are. Hopefully they're useful. So it's not just check-in for the sake of a check-in, but actually, as I said, if it's conversations or us being able to signpost funding for you, and those types of things, just throughout the conversation. And Heather will be involved in the evaluation again this year, but obviously with a slight change to thinking about this. And I think Christina talked about this, and UKRI, this type of capacity building grant has never really been done before. And so I think we're interested to see what happens. I realize I didn't mention this in the last drop-in, but it's just been confirmed. So with the Ideas Fund, just as a quick recap, that's a different grant scheme, also run by the British Science Association and supported by Science Ceilidh, but it's focused particularly about mental well-being, and the grants were much bigger, so they scaled around anywhere between £20,000 to £90,000, but exactly the same ethos around, the money went to communities. It was about driving communities experience and lived experience around mental well-being, and then pairing it with researchers, but really in a much more equitable way that wasn't being set by an institutional agenda. So there's about 30 projects funded in that round. There's not a new round, sadly, but what there is a piece of work that's going to happen over the next 18 months, which is thinking about this infrastructure. So it's the idea of what could be developed within the Highlands and Islands, still place-based, that would, even if there's no more funding from the Ideas Fund, and again, we don't know if that's the case or not, would enable these types of partnerships to happen easier, better, more equitably than before, as a piece of infrastructure, obviously involving universities, but not just universities, very much third sector. And this might be interesting to you because obviously climate change and mental well-being have a massive intersection generally, but you might also have a mental health and a well-being type programs as well, which might be interesting. And of course, again, this is also going to have a massive advocacy work in terms of like trying to shift some of the processes within higher education, for example, things that have come up all the time, things like ethics processes within research, which are never geared towards communities. They're generally more geared towards institutional reputation. Maybe I'm being a bit glib, but yeah, they're just not, the money always defaulting to the researchers and all these types of things. So that body work is also going to be launched soon, and we've got some stakeholder meetings which I'll email out on the 20th and 29th. I don't want to confuse this too much, but it also feels really silly for us not to mention that within the Highlands and Islands this work is happening, and I think there's going to be synergies to make sure that this climate change, mental well-being focus, and the synergies and the intersections between them are really examined. So hopefully that will just add to the fact that we can talk to bigger organizations to say this is the changes needed, and this way of working is important. Too briefly, not as relevant, but just wanted to flag them. So another program for Science Ceilidh, this one British Science isn't associated, isn't linked in, is Curiosity in Action. This is a new network funded by the Science Technology Facilities Council, but this is looking at the role of STEM to support youth and community learning development work. So STEM as part of culture, as part of creativity, it's definitely interdisciplinary. We don't believe in STEM and arts divide type of thing, but what we're interested in this network is how STEM is very often used as a tool to think about it in terms of like getting young people into the STEM pipeline, to think of STEM as careers. We're more interested in the role of STEM to support youth work outcomes like well-being, resilience, better relationships, and we're developing an evidence base around this. So again, it's a bit more tangential, but just aware that some of the projects, and obviously STEM involves climate action, very much so. So again, it might be just something that's of interest. And the final thing I'll just mention very briefly, again, a bit more tangential, but for those of you who do work in culture, is that we've been working with the Scottish Libraries and Information Council on a whole body of work about the role of culture to help support well-being, and especially at the moment, challenge rising social inequalities, the cost of living crisis. And so we're developing a series of conversations, and we're at a set of recommendations about how to support more community collaboration across libraries, wider culture sector, third sector, and research. So again, I can email this out, but just wanted to flag this and some connections, I think, across mental well-being and the Ideas Fund and the STEM element as well. So just something to flag in there, and really, really want to make sure that rural perspectives are really much embedded within this work. And just to round off, and then obviously welcome any other last comments. So what next? So, I've not updated the slide clearly. The new website is up and update is now. So that's great. We'll follow up with you individually to have a chat with myself or Lauren. We'll hopefully be able to help write this with you, but hopefully the paperwork will be due around end of April. Of course, you know, if you need us to be flexible, we can, but, you know, obviously we're just thinking about the payment runs as well. So hopefully that works. The first online community practice, we'll send a poll, but we're thinking Tuesday, the 30th of May or Thursday, the 1st of June. So really kind of towards the end, really appreciate if you have any preference on that. And then also just to get the dates in our diaries, because the in-person community practice, we're playing around with the beginning of September. So 5th of September, 7th of September, or the 12th of September. Again, we'll send a poll just to get a kind of early indication, not a commitment. But also any thoughts about where is very welcome, because we're very aware that very often these are always held in Inverness when it's Highlands and Islands. There are lots of reasons for that, and you will not be a stranger to them. But again, if there's really strong feelings or a case to be made, we're really happy. Or collaborations, if you've got a venue that you'd love to invite people to come to, let's have a chat about that, because I think it doesn't always have to be Inverness.